Hi, Kim here at An Oasis of Books, and today I want to share with you everything I read in July. I read 7 books, 4 nonfiction and 3 fiction. I had a really good reading month in July. I really liked everything I read. So let's get right into it. We'll start with the fiction books. And I read 3 different types of fiction books this month. I read a contemporary mystery, historical fiction, and sci-fi. So this is the contemporary mystery I read. It's number 1 in the Anna Pigeon series written by Nevada Barr. Now I picked up quite a few of these at a library used book sale recently, which I was very excited about because it sounds so good. The main character, Anna Pigeon, is a national park ranger, and each mystery, and right now there's 19 in all, goes to a different national park. So number 1, Track of the Cat, finds Anna in Texas at the Guadalupe Mountains National Park. So Anna is a very interesting character. She's quite thoughtful, very funny in an understated way, and she really sees through people quite well. And so even though there are fewer characters in this book, I felt like I really got to know them well because I'm seeing them through her eyes. I feel like Nevada Barr, the author, does a great job showing us the authentic workings of the national park system, or at least how it was when she wrote the book. This was published in 1993. And that's because Nevada Barr was a national park ranger, and that really shines through in the story. In addition to the functional elements that are so authentic, her descriptions of the nature, of the plants and the wildlife, is so vivid. It's so realistic that you feel like you're right there with her on the trail hiking through the desert. Now, this book, and I'm assuming the rest of the series will be similar, is, in my opinion, on the slower side. I've seen it rated as medium paced, but I would have said it's kind of slow paced actually. But that might be not quite accurate. Maybe actually the events do happen at a medium pace, but it feels slower because the whole way she's describing the setting in the hot, dusty desert and everything she's seeing around her, which she does describe in detail, not in a boring way though, in a fascinating way, but it does make you feel very relaxed. So I couldn't read this late at night in bed or I would fall asleep, but when I read it during the day, it was very exciting and I really enjoyed it. So in this particular mystery, the first one, Anna is in charge of keeping track of the population and health of the mountain lions in this park. And going about her duties, she comes across the body of a fellow ranger, dead. And at first, she assumes that it's probably related to a mountain lion because there is some evidence of that around the body. But upon further reflection and looking back on the photos that she took, she begins to doubt that. So when a cougar is blamed for the death of this ranger, Anna realizes she can't let it go. She's going to have to investigate because she actually believes that this was a murder. So while this wasn't as fast-paced as most of the contemporary mysteries I read, and while it also technically doesn't qualify as a cozy for a variety of reasons, I did end up really liking it, and I'm definitely going to continue the series. So the second fiction book I read in July is Let Me Tell You About a Man I Knew by Susan Fletcher. Just take a look at that cover. Is that not gorgeous? I love it. So Susan Fletcher is the author of many books, children's books as well as adult books. You might have heard of some of them: Korag, Witchlight, The Silver Dark Sea, Eve Green. But this one, Let Me Tell You About a Man I Knew, is historical fiction set in 1889. And the character that it features as one of the main sub-characters is Vincent Van Gogh. So this was toward the very end of his life, the year that he was in a home for mentally ill. So for about a year, he lived in Saint-Paul-de-Moselle in St.Remy de Provence. I don't speak a lot of French, but I did my best. So this is in Provence in France, and we know that this is all true because of the written and artistic record. So Susan Fletcher, the author, took inspiration for this story from a few things. First, from the correspondence between Vincent and his brother, Theo. They had a long-standing correspondence, and in a few of his letters, he referred to his time there and to the woman, the warden's wife there, that he had conversations with, and he described her a little bit in his letter. And then we have the 3 paintings. Portrait of Trabuc, the warden at the hospital, portrait of Madame Trabuc, and also landscape with couple walking and crescent moon. It's very clear in this painting that Van Gogh is the male in the couple, and the woman, it's been said, seems to be the warden's wife. Now, this home for the mentally ill was set at the base of the mountains amidst wheat fields and olive groves, and Fletcher does an amazing job with the descriptions in this book. You really feel like you're there walking these paths with these people and sitting under the olive trees. Granted, I have an olive orchard, so I might be identifying with it a little more than others would, but still, I feel like she did a wonderful job with the description and the pace of the book. It is gently paced. This is a very intimate book, a very close, intimate portrait of this woman. Everything is told from her point of view, and you really are inside her mind, and you really feel her feelings. It was not what I was expecting it to be. I thought it was going to be a lot more about Van Gogh. And don't get me wrong, there is a lot of Van Gogh in this, and her perception of Van Gogh. She saw him in the light of the artist and genius he was, and did not really feel that he was crazy. And being with him, the conversation she had with him, his painting of her, and later his painting of her husband, changed her life in many ways. Of course, this is the story. We don't know that this really happened, but it certainly could have. And Fletcher makes you believe that. Definitely a very touching and up-close portrait of this marriage and how the woman, Jean, works her way through all of the obstacles she's finding in her personal life and in her marriage, and coming out on the other end as Van Gogh leaves and very shortly thereafter dies. So a quiet book, but a powerful book. Really, I think that upon a second reading, it would be just as stunning, if not more so. So the 3rd fiction book I read in July was The Stardust Grail. And this was written by Yume Kitase. She just wrote it last year, 2024, and it's only her 2nd novel. Her debut novel was published in 2023, The Deep Sky, which I have not read. But I was drawn to read this book by the cover. It's so striking, and I do like sci-fi, and the synopsis sounded kind of cozy, and so I thought, gonna give it a try. So the protagonist is Maya Hoshimoto, and she has been an art thief for the last decade of her life, but sort of a Robin Hood art thief. She has been quite good at stealing back artifacts that have been stolen from alien civilizations and returning them to them. But for a few reasons, she has recently retired from that life and returned to being a grad student. She thinks at this time she has the determination and discipline to stick it out and finish her graduate degree in anthropology. But she does miss her best friend, still out there in space, and someone comes to her and offers her one last job. Now, she's not going to take this job until she hears what it is. They want her to go find and steal an invaluable object that can actually save an alien species. And the species is that of her best friend. So she takes the job. She meets up with her best friend, finds out some crew has been hired. She's not sure if she approves of them quite yet. And an old colleague also shows up. They go about having some very complex and crazy adventures, trying to get their hands on this ancient artifact. But other people want this artifact too. Other species want this artifact. In the end, Maya has some really hard decisions to make, but I'm not going to spoil that for you. Now, when I started this book, I was very excited because it was definitely giving me Becky Chambers vibes. I was feeling, yes, this is going to be the kind of cozy sci-fi that I've really been craving. However, about a third of the way into the book, I realized, no, not really. I mean, there is great potential there for that type of tone, but I'd say the middle third of the book was a bit uneven compared to the first third and the last third. The middle part of the book, I was kind of close to DNFing it actually, because I was getting confused and it was getting a little bit boring. But then it picked up again. And the last third of the book, it came together. And I actually really liked the book by the end. So I'm definitely going to give this author another read. I'll probably go back and read her first book, The Deep Sky. And apparently she has another book coming out very soon, I think in September. And yeah, I can tell she can be a great writer. And just for me, the middle part wasn't quite as evenly paced as I would have wished, or quite as clear as I would have wished. But really did like it overall. So moving on to nonfiction. The first nonfiction book I read was The White Ship by Charles Spencer, subtitle being Conquest, Anarchy, and the Wrecking of Henry I's Dream. I love that subtitle, and it's so accurate. This book was amazing. Now, a lot of people have asked me when I've mentioned this book before, is Charles Spencer who I think he is? I didn't know he was a writer. Yes, I know. When I first started reading this book, I wasn't aware either, but then I looked into it, and yes, Charles Spencer. He's a journalist and a broadcaster, author of many other books, one of which I want to read very soon. It's called Killers of the King, The Men Who Dared to Execute Charles I, because that will go along really well with my current study of the English Civil Wars that I'm doing for Historathon Quarter 3. But anyway, getting back to Charles Spencer. Yes, he's also the 9th Earl Spencer, brother to Princess Diana Spencer. But The White Ship, like some of his other history books, is a bestseller and highly respected. Dan Jones himself said it's brilliant. And right here on the cover, Anthony Horowitz says, it's Game of Thrones, but in the real world. Well, I haven't seen Game of Thrones, but I am aware enough of what it is to say I agree. This is crazy and enthralling. So the sinking of the White Ship in 1120 was one of the absolute worst disasters in British history, killing the heir to the throne and really throwing into utter chaos all expectations and plans for the crown. So this book is divided into 3 parts: triumph, disaster, and chaos. And the first part is definitely the longest part of the book, and it is the lead up to the main event. And it's how we see Henry I come to power, from starting with the Norman conquest to him finally having his heir reach maturity. It was a long, twisted road. And Spencer is such a great narrative historian that you follow along in trance despite the enormous amount of details, the names, the places, the dates. You don't need to remember all those. You're getting the broad scope of everything that happened, and the story sticks with you. And when it gets to the sinking, you are ready for it. You don't want to watch it. You're sort of like, but you're ready for it, and you want to see what happens next. Which is what you find out in part 3, utter chaos. Having finished The White Ship finally, because I started it in January, went into my reading slump, and then picked it up again in July. But having finished it now and really, really enjoyed it, I'm ready for the next book in my Plantagenet project, and that will be Dan Jones' The Plantagenets. So the second nonfiction book I read in July was this one, The English Civil Wars, 1640 to 1660 by Blair Worden. Now, this was a fantastic resource for me because I really didn't know much at all about the English Civil Wars other than, the little you hear in pop culture. But actually having read or studied anything about this, nope, I'd never done it before. Well, I picked the right book to start. Is it long? Nope. But it's so well written. It's so easy to read and understand everything that was going on. It answered my questions. and really set the tone and the background for me to be able to read historical fiction that's set in this time period and understand what's going on. And I say that because I recently came across an author, Minette Walters. Well, I didn't come across her really. She was recommended by Kim at a book forest. And she wrote 2 books I really wanted to read, The Swift and the Harrier and The Players, that were set right in the middle of this time frame. Now, in August, after finishing this book, I did go ahead and read the first in that duology, The Swift and the Harrier, but I can't tell you about it until my August wrap up. Sneak peek, I loved it. Okay, but this book, I'm telling you, really accomplished everything I wanted it to. I had a lot of questions. I mean, what caused this war between the king and Parliament anyway? How long did it take to brew before it all went down? Why were some of the people on the king's side and some on the side of Parliament, what made them choose sides? And how in the world did this monarchy, this thing that had been, the established structure of government and the way of life for the British people for centuries, how did it come to implode like this? This book answered all my questions and more. I learned all about the new model army and the rise of Cromwell to power and the execution of Charles I and the establishment of a republic in Britain. And then finally, the interesting years of the restoration of the monarchy. Yep, all that in this little book. Really solid, entertaining read. So the third nonfiction book I read in July was An Invisible Thread. This is written by Laura Schroff with a little assistance from Alex Tresniowski. Now, I picked this book up on a whim when I was visiting a bookstore, and I was sitting in the cafe drinking my iced coffee, and I started reading, and I couldn't put it down. Is this, an amazingly written book? Not really, but it's the story behind it that is captivating. So this is a book that shows how a seemingly insignificant, small act of kindness can actually have a huge, life-changing effect. It deals with the effects of cycles of abuse and addiction in families and how young people can break free from those. Mostly, it talks about the relationship between 2 very unlikely people. One day, 35-year-old Laura Schroff was walking down the busy New York street. She was a very successful sales executive selling ads for a new newspaper. And she had everything she'd wanted in life pretty much. She could buy anything she wanted, and she had done it all herself. She had not gone to college. She came from a lower middle class background, didn't have much support at all. So she worked her way up and she achieved success, what she had defined success as anyway up to that point. But as she was walking down the New York City street that day, she heard a voice say, "Can you spare any change, ma'am? I'm hungry." She didn't really register that at first and continued walking, but eventually it clicked and she turned around, not really knowing why, went back and invited that young 11-year-old boy to lunch. They went to McDonald's, then they went to the park and got an ice cream. And that was the beginning of a relationship that has spanned decades. That little 11-year-old boy was Maurice. Today, he's much, much older. I think he's in his mid to late 40s now, maybe even in his 50s. And he is successful in life. He has, sure, career success, but he also has family success. He has a wonderful marriage, he has wonderful children, and he's happy in his life. And he traces it all back to this incident. From this point on, Maurice and Laura met up at least once a week, every week. Laura provided consistent friendship and support to Maurice, and he in turn provided consistent friendship and support to Laura. This wasn't just a feel-good story, although it did make me feel good, but Laura went on, as did Maurice, to make this a national, even international thing. They both give talks all over, focusing on the importance of being kind. They really emphasize that to be a hero or to make a difference in the world, in your community, you just have to reach out and do one small thing for someone else in need. And that's a lesson we all need to learn over and over again, isn't it? I know I do. Now, the fourth nonfiction book that I read in July is one that I also used in July, and I'm still using it. I'll be using it all year, probably every year. It has so much in it. It's called The Year of Cozy by Ariana Adarme. Now, the subtitle of this book is 125 Recipes, Crafts, and Other Homemade Adventures. And that is exactly what this fun book is. It's full of seasonal, simple, interesting projects, gift ideas, decor, useful stuff for around the house, activity ideas. But let me show you some of what's in here and you'll see what I mean. Ever wanted to make homemade candles? Well, she gives you all the instructions you need, all the supplies, and step-by-step pictures. In addition, you can see there, she writes at the beginning of each of her entries a good paragraph or two that describes, how she did this activity, what got her into it, some tips about it. And her writing style is very approachable, very friendly, very enjoyable. Now, just this morning, I harvested a whole bunch more pears from one of my pear trees, and this recipe is going to come in mighty handy. Burnt butter pear ginger crumble. That sounds and looks amazing. Now, my adult children will tell you I am not really and never have been known for my ability to decorate the house nicely. That's just really not my thing, other than bookcases. I have lots and lots of bookcases, probably 60 or so now. But I think I could manage something like this with the way that she describes how to do it and with all the pictures she gives as examples. This is pumpkin arrangement with persimmons and cotton. I mean, for that matter, since I just planted some persimmon trees this year, in a couple of years, I'll even have my own persimmons to do this with. How about some cozy drinks? Here we have golden milk tea, warm chai tea, and decadent hot chocolate. So if I'm gonna make that pumpkin and persimmon table decoration for Thanksgiving, how about Christmas? Well, I'm gonna make this holiday wreath. I've even got pomegranates for it. How about flavored butters? They're really simple to make apparently, but super impressive. I know my kids would be impressed. And delicious. She gives you all sorts of varieties here. The two that sound the most intriguing to me are rosé and shallot and coconut rum butter. How about making your own birch trivets for gifts like this? All right, now I'm getting super hungry. Chicken soba noodle salad, anyone? Look at that. My dad's favorite cake is pineapple upside down cake. So every year on his birthday, which is Christmas Eve, I bake him one. And he's always super appreciative. But this year I'm going to have a surprise for him. I also know he loves blood oranges, but you can rarely ever find them around here. Last year I planted two, and this year they've got oranges on them. So come his birthday, late December, I think I'm gonna make this recipe, orange thyme upside down cake. Is that not beautiful? I can't even imagine how scrumptious it is either. Now, some of you might know I have another YouTube channel. It's a gardening channel, and I like to grow perennials of everything I can, in addition to my fruit and nut orchard. So I have a lot of shrubs. However, I never heard about this kind of shrub before, a drink called a shrub. I guess it's a British thing. Okay, tell me, all of you who are over there in Britain, what in the world? I've never heard of shrub. Do you actually use that term still today? Well, whatever. These sound amazing. Peach shrub, cherry shrub, strawberry shrub. Apparently, a shrub is an old school English thing, really tart and effervescent. The fruit and sugar macerate for a few days and ferment in a slow, natural way. And then you strain it and add some vinegar. And then you can use it in things like sparkling water, cocktails, and snow cones. Okay, that sounds like fun, and I'm gonna try it. I'll let you know how it goes when I do. So thank you so much if you stuck with me to the end of this video. That was what I read in July. 7 books, 7 great books. Really happy with reading in July. And you know what? August is going great too. So, well, stay tuned, subscribe if you haven't already, and see what I read in August. Until next time, I'm wishing you all happy reading.